Have you been hanging out with Meghan and Harry since
No.
they've been in California?
No, I don't know them.
What do you think of them?
I admire Harry for going to Afghanistan.
Bill Maher isn't one to mince words. And when it comes to Meghan Markle, he's shown he's got plenty to say. The outspoken comedian and political commentator has been particularly sharp in his criticism, especially following her recent public appearances and ventures. Maher, like many online, has seemingly grown weary of what he perceives as a constant stream of complaints and carefully curated performances from the Duchess. His pointed remarks contribute to a larger public conversation questioning Meghan's authenticity and motivations, particularly in the wake of her departure from the royal family.
Meanwhile, if you are a watcher of the royal family and you like secrets, you might want to sit down because this is a doozy.
One of Maher's key targets has been Meghan's tendency to discuss her struggles and challenges in public forums. He's part of a chorus of voices that find it difficult to sympathise with someone living a life of immense privilege, who frequently appears to be playing the victim card. The contrast between her seemingly luxurious lifestyle and her public expressions of hardship doesn't sit right with many. And Maher has tapped into this sentiment with candid commentary, saying things like, "They're ridiculous. She never stops whining."
Anybody who's had military service,
agree.
I can only criticize so much because I haven't. And there's nothing that compares to military service.
Fueling a narrative that suggests her emotional displays are calculated rather than genuine. The fact that an old clip exists of Meghan jokingly saying she can cry on command has only amplified this suspicion, making her tearless podcast appearance even more scrutinised. Social media users and some commentators quickly flagged her polished delivery as rehearsed, with one person joking that even her tears have a PR team. This level of public doubt highlights the challenge Meghan faces in convincing a skeptical audience of her authenticity, particularly when her public appearances often feel carefully managed and focused on promoting her brand or narrative.
When you're on a plane, and I remember back in the day, you'd sit next to a stranger and sometimes you'd feel more comfortable telling your life story to a complete stranger.
The release of her lifestyle brand, as ever, and the subsequent trademark filings for various items like yoga mats and pet bowls only added fuel to the fire. Critics online quickly labelled it a desperate brand grab, questioning the authenticity of someone from her background launching such a venture. This played into the perception that her podcast appearance was less about sharing her soul and more about promoting her commercial interests, blurring the lines between genuine vulnerability and calculated marketing.
They're ridiculous after that. They want it both ways. You know, you can't be, these people were so mean to us. And
However, it wasn't just the perceived lack of authenticity that drew criticism. The content of Meghan's public appearances also came under fire. Critics found her anecdotes to be overly self-focused, constantly circling back to her brand or personal struggles. This perceived self-absorption, particularly in interviews and on her podcast, alienated some viewers who were hoping for more substance or a broader perspective. The Express newspaper cited royal insiders who believed her emotional pivot wouldn't be enough to repair her image, suggesting that the public was tiring of the victim narrative. There's a growing sentiment that Meghan and Harry went too hard on portraying themselves as victims and misjudged the public mood, which, while sometimes sympathetic to hardship, appears to have reached a saturation point with their story.
I'm not the leader of anything, except maybe a contingent of centrist-minded people who think there's got to be a better way of running this country than hating each other every minute.
Meghan's appearance at the Time 100 summit also sparked sharp criticism. Despite not making the prestigious Time 100 list of most influential people, she was invited to speak, which many online users found absurd. Critics pointed to her various business ventures either struggling or being perceived as commercial grabs, rather than genuinely impactful projects. The fact that her lifestyle brand focused on items like jam, honey, and cupcake sprinkles wasn't seen as a world-changing accomplishment by many, leading some to question the basis of her inclusion at such a high-profile event. GB News quoted critics who labelled her a self-promoter, leaning on her royal ties for relevance and influence. This sentiment suggests that despite her efforts to build an independent brand, Her connection to the royal family remains the primary source of public interest, and without tangible, impactful achievements, her influence is being questioned.
Meghan Markle has finally revealed why she and Prince Harry call each other M and H. What could it be?
Adding to the controversies surrounding Meghan, Prince Harry's recent BBC interview also drew heavy criticism. In the interview, he reportedly criticised King Charles for not addressing his security concerns, particularly in the wake of losing a court appeal regarding his security detail in the UK. This public critique of his father and the royal institution was widely seen as being in poor taste, especially given King Charles's recent health concerns. The Daily Mail's Sarah Vine called Harry's tone self-pitying and accused him of exploiting his father's diagnosis for sympathy. ITV News reported that palace insiders slammed his comments, and The Mirror noted the king's growing distrust, fearing that private conversations would be turned into public spectacles. Online users were equally harsh, branding Harry as entitled and calling the interview a royal pity party.
Poor us, and we don't want all this attention, and then let me write a book about how much we don't want attention.
The broader sentiment surrounding Harry's interview is that he exaggerated his grievances, further deepening the rift with his family. This public display of dissatisfaction, coupled with the long-standing narrative that Meghan dislikes the royal family and contributed to the strained relationships, has done little to endear them to the public or the palace. Some commentators, like Megyn Kelly, have gone so far as to label Meghan a malignant narcissist, while The Telegraph's Celia Walden described her podcast as a self-focused therapy session. Reports from Page 6 also suggested that brands like Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop had rejected Meghan's pitch to collaborate on lifestyle ventures, reportedly finding her too polarizing.
This moment was so influential for me because she turned around and she goes, "Hi, sweetheart, what's your name?" First thing I learned.
The public reception to Meghan and Harry's ventures and public appearances often highlights a fundamental tension. Are they genuinely sharing their experiences and building a new life, or are they strategically leveraging their royal connection for commercial gain? Critics argue that when Meghan's every emotional display seems tied to promoting her brand, it ceases to be vulnerability and becomes performance, and not a particularly convincing one. This skepticism is amplified by the perceived lack of authenticity in some of her interactions, such as the now infamous podcast interview where the host's enthusiastic reactions were widely seen as overly forced and fake.
She just has this total different view of where the Sussexes are at. No doubt she saw the BBC interview. Well, you would imagine she'd seen the BBC interview.
The dynamic between Meghan and the podcast host Jamie Kern-Lima also drew significant criticism. While Lima is a successful businesswoman, her gushing praise and seemingly staged reactions during the interview made many viewers cringe. It felt less like a genuine conversation and more like a carefully crafted performance designed to portray Meghan in a positive light. Commentators noted that the interview felt like a Meghan hype session, with the host acting more like a cheerleader than an interviewer. This further fueled the perception that Meghan surrounds herself with people who are unwilling to offer her a dose of reality, reinforcing the idea that her public persona is carefully managed and lacks genuine spontaneity.
In the 80s, I dated a very famous woman whose identity I will never reveal and only ever refer to her using our secret nickname.
The infamous Super Mario Brothers analogy Meghan used to describe her relationship with Harry, casting him as the hero rescuing her from the dragon, was also a moment that drew significant mockery. This seemingly innocent comparison was interpreted by many as a self-centered and unrealistic portrayal of their dynamic, further highlighting the perceived disconnect between their privileged reality and the narratives they present to the public. Critics questioned who exactly Harry was rescuing her from, given that she had actively chosen to leave the royal family and had reportedly encouraged him to do the same. This anecdote, like many others, was seen through a cynical lens, reinforcing the narrative that Meghan is more interested in crafting a compelling story than presenting a realistic picture of her life.
It's so full of adjectives. It was inspiring, they're enchanting, this is amazing. The way these two women...
Ultimately, The ongoing public debate surrounding Meghan Markle's behaviour, media ventures, and relationships highlights a complex and often contradictory public image. Her supporters see a woman unfairly targeted by the media and the institution she left behind, while critics view her actions as calculated attempts to leverage her royal status for personal gain.
The most important thing that I work on every day, my practice, is trying to really integrate it, to integrate the joy, to integrate, like we say, like.
What do you believe is driving Meghan Markle's public behaviour? A carefully crafted strategic plan, or a sense of desperation as she navigates a post-royal world? Share your take in the comments below. And if you want to stay in the loop on all the latest drama and headlines, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe.